In early July 2025, just when the conflict between Ukraine and Russia seemed to have settled into a stalemate, over 20,000 Chinese troops, along with hundreds of tanks, rocket artillery, and armed drones, unexpectedly crossed Ukraine's northern border. There was no warning. Radar stations went dark. Towns were engulfed in flames, and defense lines were crushed under a simultaneous onslaught from both ground and air. In less than 3 days, the map of Ukraine was bent. Armored units retreated westward, abandoning the northern corridor to the enemy's destructive advance. Throngs of people fled in chaos, amidst the roar of tanks and the deafening crash of rocket artillery pounding residential areas. Those watching the war from Moscow were ecstatic. They believed this would be the final, decisive blow. Yet, in the moment when many thought Ukraine was about to fall, the unthinkable happened. A seemingly silent superpower intervened, and when they did, the entire battlefield sky changed color. F-35s flew overhead with sharp, cold barrages. MQ-9 Reaper drones hunted down every logistics station like predators. Abrams tanks advanced across burning fields, carving a path with sensors and cannons accurate to the meter. A formation that had seized hundreds of kilometers was now pushed back like waves against a rock. Why did the US choose to act at that precise moment, and which nation truly holds the key to real power? If your heart raced reading about what unfolded in the skies over Ukraine, hit like, share, and follow, because this is just the beginning. What comes next will be even bolder, more dangerous, and not for the faint of heart. The Dark Landing, opening battle on the Gomel axis. July 2025, 2:45 in the morning, Kiev time. A pale blue light streaked across the northern Ukrainian sky before vanishing, as if it had never existed. Seconds later, dozens of orange-yellow flashes erupted from the horizon, followed by a rolling thunder of explosions that reverberated across the land. The attack had begun. From the Belarusian border, over 28,000 Chinese soldiers, mechanized special units of the Northwest Military Region, surged across the Gomel-Chernihiv axis. Leading the charge were 280 desert-painted Type 99A2 tanks and over 500 VN-22 combat vehicles equipped with digital combat control systems. Behind them, 36 PCL-181 and PHL-16 rocket artillery systems simultaneously opened fire, raining large-caliber rockets onto border towns. Within the first 90 minutes, over 1,600 cluster munitions pounded the Nizhyn area, a key point northeast of Kiev. Each volley created fire columns over 200 meters high, accompanied by a concussive blast that shattered windows kilometers away. The Ukrainian 92nd Brigade's communication system went dead by the 13th minute. Streetlights, traffic cameras, military radios all fell silent. The only sounds remaining were fragmented cries on backup communication channels. In the sky, Winglong 2 drones, China's most advanced attack drones, silently flew at an altitude of over 7,000 meters. They located Ukrainian resistance pockets and relayed coordinates to mobile command centers in Belarus. AKD-10 guided missiles were immediately launched from afar, incinerating artillery positions before they could fire. A Ukrainian M777 position was wiped out just 4 minutes after firing its first volley. The first line of defense was quickly breached. Small towns like Berezna, Koryukivka, and Mena fell to the PLA in less than 4 hours. Images from civilian drones showed an iron snake of armor, stretching over 6 kilometers long, tearing through suburban roads. Some tanks were struck by Ukrainian mines, flung skyward and exploding like deadly fireworks. But for everyone destroyed, 5 more rolled past their fallen comrades, pressing on. By 7:20 in the morning, the city of Nizhyn began to collapse. Gunfire erupted from every street corner. Urban defense units were cut off from communication, without orders, without resupply, and unaware of the enemy's location. All they knew was that armored vehicles bearing red flags were crushing every barricade, from brick walls to bus blockades. The sky gradually lightened, but the ground was covered in ash. On Highway H07 leading to Kiev, thousands of civilians fled. Cars were abandoned, motorcycles packed with the elderly and children. A cluster munition struck the middle of the crowd, setting dozens of vehicles ablaze. Local firefighters could not reach them. Riot police were deployed, only to direct people to find alternative routes to evacuate. In less than 6 hours, China had seized the entire Gomel-Nizhyn strategic corridor, opening a deep path into central Ukraine. 72 hours of bloodshed, Ukraine's complete failure. On the first day after the landing, Ukraine's eastern defense lines began to crack. First came the barrages of rocket artillery striking makeshift artillery clusters along the river. Then, suicide drones crashed down, destroying mobile command vehicles. But by noon, the cracking turned into a collapse. Forward armored units received no orders. Communication from battalions ceased as radio systems were simultaneously jammed. A company ordered to hold a highway never reached its position. The entire convoy was ambushed at the edge of a small village, leaving only burning steel frames scattered beneath fallen drones. On the second day, casualties mounted by the hour. Within the first 48 hours, Ukraine had lost over 150 armored vehicles, primarily BTR-4s, BMP-2s, and older troop carriers. Over 60 self-propelled artillery pieces were destroyed, many exploding while reloading. The logistics system disintegrated as resupply convoys were continuously ambushed by medium-range drones. By noon on the third day, the official casualty count confirmed by the General Staff reached 4,500. In Kiev's bunkers, dense operational maps began to be taken down, sheet by sheet. The second-line defenses were breached before reserve forces could mobilize. The rear also began to crumble. Over 30,000 civilians had abandoned the northeast region in less than 3 days. On Highway 828, the line of people stretched for nearly 10 kilometers. Motorcycles, bicycles, trucks, old SUVs crammed with children, elderly women, and goods. On the evening of the third day, the president appeared on national television. His face was haggard from sleepless nights, but his eyes held a stubborn glint. He spoke clearly, slowly and firmly. Without America, Ukraine will lose half its territory. And if that happens, Europe will have no way back. The signal was received that very night. Across the ocean, the National Security Council convened an emergency meeting in a windowless underground room. A map of Ukraine appeared on a large screen. The northern attack axis had penetrated over 60 kilometers deep. All 3 outermost defensive lines had been breached. Local forces no longer had mechanical defense capabilities. On satellite screens, enemy armored columns continued to advance, unopposed. A senior commanding officer stated clearly, if we do not respond, the entire post-World War II security architecture will collapse in a week. The strong will have the right to redraw borders. And when that happens, there will be no safe zones anymore. The US president signed an order for military intervention. C-17 aircraft carrying mobile defense systems, anti-tank missiles, suicide drones, and emergency medical supplies swiftly took off from bases in Germany and Poland. Heavy armored units were placed on full alert. Stealth fighters began mobilizing from Lakenheath. No declaration, no news reports. Only the hoarse roar of engines tearing through the wind from the west. Only gray silhouettes approaching the Ukrainian border. And a question echoed back to the entire world. Will anyone dare to stop America again? When America intervened and turned the tide. On the morning of July 4th, 2025, the sky over western Ukraine shifted color, like water disturbed by an undertow. From bases along the NATO border, squadrons of stealth fighters began to enter airspace in a tight pincer formation. 16 F-35s led, combined with 12 F-22s allocated for ground suppression. The Asiati suppression of enemy air defenses operation began precisely as enemy radar stations were setting up their sweep cycles. AGM-88 missiles were launched from over 80 kilometers away, activating electronic radiation detection mode and locking onto emission sources. The first radar station exploded just as its third sweep return signal appeared. The second station was hit at the base of its antenna, the blast collapsing the entire equipment frame. Each target was struck with precision firepower, hitting directly at the heart of the command network. Less than 11 minutes later, the entire ground electronic space was blinded, opening a wide attack corridor for subsequent assets. At higher altitudes, MQ-9 Reapers circled slowly, maintaining over 7,000 meter altitude, activating synthetic aperture radar and multispectral sensors. Thermal maps from the eastern region showed PHL-191 rocket artillery systems preparing for their next volley. As the rounds were loaded into the bays, 2 Hellfires detached from the drone's belly, successively striking the center of the equipment cluster. One system was destroyed mid-fire, leaving a bright red halo on the tactical observation screen. Within 2 hours, 6 similar positions were erased from the map, while the airspace was torn open by stealth technology. On the ground, the battlefield began to turn to steel. Heavy transport aircraft had landed the previous night, unleashing Abrams M1A2 SEP V3 tanks from their compartments. Each tank carried multi-layered composite armor, integrated with trophy active protection systems and next-generation thermal sights. They split into 3 prongs, maneuvering towards the center of the front along a diagonal axis, closing in on enemy armored formations from the flanks. As the enemy began to reposition their formations in response, Ukrainian rapid deployment special units simultaneously deployed portable electronic warfare systems, creating localized jamming. In a heavily jammed environment, javelins were activated by hand-aimed laser signals, each striking the top of a turret. In the first 6 hours, over 40 enemy tanks were neutralized using the encirclement, divide, suppress method from 2 directions. Information linkage was maintained using the Link 16 protocol, allowing airborne fighters to share real-time data with ground forces. Whenever an F-35 sensor picked up a thermal signature from tens of kilometers away, the data was immediately transmitted to a tank or drone ready to fire. The strikes did not depend on line of sight. They relied on data. Strikes from unidentified locations. Reaper drones shifted targets from artillery to supply lines. They tracked logistics formations, targeting fuel trucks, mobile communication stations, and battlefield repair teams. Each supply point was severed with utterly precise Hellfire strikes. The enemy map gradually lost its operational chain capability. Ground fire lost its rhythm. Mobile units were fragmented into small groups, moving without clear direction, encountering attacks from 3 sides without clear command channels. As the hour hand moved to 15 Wazirs, the enemy armored formation was shattered along 3 axes of advance. Armored vehicles attempted to divert to tactical retreat routes but encountered blocking fire. Long-range artillery from third-party forces engaged. Guided by drone coordinates, each shot created a deep crater, forcing enemy tanks to retreat via secondary roads, where crossfire traps had already been laid. The tactical map recorded over 180 armored and mechanized vehicles rendered combat ineffective in just half a day. This included command vehicles, logistics vehicles, reconnaissance vehicles, and pontoon bridge equipment at 3 locations. Convoys carrying chemical defense equipment were crippled. At 2 other locations, auxiliary radar stations had their signal lines cut by drones. Within the next 6 hours, the entire Eastern Combat Corridor began to narrow. Units were pushed back into sparsely forested areas, lacking battlefield protection. By the end of the day, there was no more rocket artillery fire echoing from the enemy side. On tactical display screens at forward command posts, critical threat signals significantly decreased. The offensive path was open. The pressure from the north had been broken. At a recently retaken intersection, a drone transmitted an image, an abandoned enemy armored vehicle, its antenna mast still upright, driver's door ajar. Right beside it, Abrams tank tracks were imprinted in the mud, heading straight east in the direction of the largest counteroffensive since the start of the war. Lessons for Beijing. Warning for Moscow. At logistics hubs, enemy technical teams had withdrawn, leaving behind empty spare parts depots. Many pieces of equipment were pushed into forest corners, hastily covered with camouflage nets, but all were detected by drone thermal sensors. A large logistics station near the Politsky axis exploded at 0324 a.m. when a suicide drone struck a fuel tank in the yard. The blast created a fire that spread to 3 adjacent warehouse units. Images captured by thermal cameras showed the shockwave extending to the outer fence, tearing apart dozens of specialized equipment blocks in an instant. The enemy's attacking formation no longer formed any clear battle array. Armored spearheads that had approached Kiev were pushed back towards the border in less than 2 days. West of Chernihiv, a pontoon bridge, just deployed less than 4 hours prior, was struck by guided artillery. The bridge had collapsed, breaking into twisted steel fragments and drifting downstream. The supply corridor completely disintegrated, taking with it all capability to sustain the offensive. In the command rooms of Europe's early warning systems, satellite charts showed the invaders' control shrinking by the hour. In previously occupied areas, reconnaissance drones transmitted images of hastily dismantled auxiliary radar positions, hundreds of supply crates strewn about in disarray, many still with uncut ties. A section of forest by the road was torn up by hurrying tank tracks, revealing camouflage bunkers that had not been used. In Washington, the president appeared at a podium before a still flag. The White House chief did not lower his voice nor use ambiguous language. The statement was delivered as a principle. The United States does not seek conflict, but anyone who thinks they can redraw the world map by force will receive a lesson in reality. And reality, we always define. A campaign prepared with months of resupply, with thousands of tons of equipment, with multiple layers of strategic intent, now halted like a discordant piece of music amidst its climax. Asian generals called this a costly lesson. European analysts considered it a chilling warning. And the whole world, from operational tents in Poland to meeting rooms in Washington, noted one thing: every time America acts, the global balance of power immediately shifts. All content above is purely simulated, hypothetical, strategic, analytical. It is not intended to incite violence, political bias, or military provocation, or war. The content is for hypothetical simulation and analysis purposes only. Any misinterpretation will not be accepted. We are not responsible for any interpretation or application derived from the video content. Viewers should exercise their own judgment, verify information, and consume it selectively. Thank you very much for staying with us until the end. If you are passionate about military affairs, enjoy analysis, and proposing hypotheses, stay with our channel. If you found this video interesting, please click like and subscribe to not miss any daily updates from us. Now, you can watch some of our latest and most popular videos currently on screen. Goodbye and see you in the next video.